I'll share the process of glazing over an underpainting with a limited palette. I've prepared the underpainting with titanium white and raw umber, and it's dried completely. The colors we'll use for glazing include titanium white, raw umber, yellow ochre, cadmium red light, burnt sienna, and raw sienna. Glazing is the application of very thin, transparent layers of paint. Here I'm applying a transparent layer of cadmium red light in the lips, cheeks, and other places where I see cadmium red in the reference picture. The paint is made transparent either by using an extremely thin layer or by thinning the paint with a medium such as linseed oil. Here I'm using Liquid Light Gel. Liquid dries faster than linseed oil, which works well for me because I like to apply another coat after the painting dries overnight. Each layer of glazes has to be completely dry before the next layer can be applied. I'll continue with the cadmium red, and then I'll pick up some raw sienna. When I change paint colors, I don't wash my brush. Instead, I wipe it on a paper towel until it's almost dry. The colors I'm using are close enough together that this doesn't cause any issue with the color. If I was using colors that were opposite on the color wheel, then I would need to keep 2 or 3 brushes going so that I wouldn't contaminate my colors. I'll add transparent layers of color to the hair using raw sienna and some burnt sienna. The highlights will have a touch of yellow ochre, and I'll use my raw umber for some of the shadow areas. I keep observing my reference picture and adding bits of transparent color where I see them in the picture. I often move from one area of the portrait to the other, but this is not random. What I'm doing is I'm using the paint on my brush. If I have a certain color on my brush, I'll look for other areas that I can paint with that color, and it makes the process more efficient. Once a transparent layer of glazes has been applied, I'll use some titanium white to bring out the highlights again. Then the painting will be left to dry overnight, and the process repeated several times. Here you'll see that I apply the titanium white and then use an almost dry brush to soften the edges. The painting has been left to dry overnight, and now I'm applying a second layer of glazes. You'll start to see a richer, more natural skin tone develop. And I've slowed down the recording here so that you can see the process in real time. just applied a thin layer of transparent color over the entire face. Now I'm using titanium white to bring out the highlights again. Just like before, you'll see that I apply the paint and then come back with a dry brush to smooth it out and soften some of the edges. Notice I work back and forth over the same areas several times. I'm studying the reference picture, studying the painting, and then making subtle changes to bring the two closer together. Some of the changes are so subtle they're almost imperceptible. Now that I've lightened all the highlights, I'll turn my attention to the eyes and eyelashes. I'll use raw umber for this, with a little medium. I load my brush on both sides with a minimum of paint and in such a way that I create a chiseled edge that can make a sharp line. The eyes are my favorite part of a painting. They're the window to the soul, and I always feel like if the eyes are right, then everything else will come together. I'll reload the brush several times during this process. I have a very small amount of paint on the brush, and I'm only touching the very tip of the brush to the panel. I pull away as I reach the end of the eyelashes so that the ends are always thinner than the base. And here I'm studying the reference picture very closely. Eyelashes overlap, they're not parallel, and they clump together. So all this has to be observed very closely. Again, the painting has dried overnight, and now we'll add a third layer of color and highlights. Now the layers of glaze are building up so that light bounces through the layers of color. The skin is starting to take on a soft, realistic glow. With each layer, I continue to make subtle adjustments in light and value. And there are slight adjustments of color at this stage. It seems the longer you study a reference picture, the more detail your eye is able to pick out. Just like we did after the other layers of glaze, we'll bring out the highlights again with titanium white. A few final adjustments and some fine lines, and the portrait will be finished. I hope you've enjoyed watching this process up close and picked up a few tips and techniques you can use in your own work. I'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions or comments or pictures of your own work, send them my way. And if you have an idea for a tutorial you'd like to see, let me know that too. See you next time.